But what does it mean to have a good, healthy ecosystem and not allowing the ecosystem to grow?
Our host for our panel is from Adelaide. She has 20 plus years experience working in government and communications. She's an exceptional coach in things including hypnotherapy, so be careful. But she's a wonderful facilitator from Adelaide. Please welcome to the stage Tanya Davies. Our next speaker who will be coming to the stage is our one and only Andrew Flannery, who has just been on the piano. He is recognised as one of the top lawyers in the world in his area of expertise. He has many, many talents. He loves four-wheel driving, but most of all, he loves a great story. Please welcome Andrew Flannery. And our final panellist is from all the way from Central Eastern Europe. He came to Australia with very little English. He's had to find his way and learn how to communicate. He knows what it's like to be sitting there smiling, nodding, and not knowing what the hell anyone is saying. But he's a remarkable communication expert, and so please welcome to the stage Pavel Lipovsky.
Thank you so much, Corey, for that very warm introduction. Gentlemen, I'm going to set the scene for everyone here today, because the very fact that we're actually sitting here, balancing our egos perfectly together after those wonderful introductions, shows that we can actually have a really good, strong, healthy ego. But what does it mean to have a good, healthy ecosystem and not allowing the ecosystem to grow? So let's actually start by working out what actually is this ecosystem, Andrew. Give us the distinction of what is it between the ecosystem and the ecosystem.
For me, it's two pictures. For me, it's two pictures. Where do you go to straight away for ecosystem? Do you go Great Barrier Reef, or for me, it's rainforest. And I'm thinking rainforest, giant trees, canopy on the top, orchids growing in the boughs of the trees, epiphytes everywhere, hundreds of thousands of species of animals, all working together in a symbiotic matrix and relationship. And who's in charge of the rainforest? Nobody. Who decides which seed is planted in which spot? Nobody. It's this system that's self-perpetuating, self-reinforcing, a symbiotic relationship. So, I see that as an ecosystem. What's an ecosystem? The ecosystem, I see a farm.
Yep.
And I see those farms in Western New South Wales and in Southern Western Australia, acres and acres of wheat. And 2 generations ago, the farmer decided this was going to be a wheat crop, and he got rid of every tree, every bush, every blade of grass. The soil was cultivated so that it grows wheat. Killed off every animal that attacks wheat. Poisoned every insect that attacks wheat. Shoots every rabbit that eats wheat. You get the picture. Wheat. Now here's the question, which one's better? And many of us will lead to the rainforest. It's beautiful, it's complicated, it's wonderful. Which one produces more wheat? The answer is the farm. So for 200 years at least, we've been getting very, very good at producing individual items in a specific way to have speed to market, quality control, and volume. But here's the question I've got for all of you. How many of you are involved in organisations in Australia today that have the luxury of producing one product in one particular way? None of us. In professional services, every question's new. And if the question's been asked before and I've given an answer, then somewhere it's on Google and I'm irrelevant. Every product needs to be customised and personalised. So if we go back to the question of these two worlds, the rainforest and the farm, and ask the question, produce for me a cocktail of botanicals that will cure pancreatic cancer. The farmer says, I got nothing. But the rainforest says, yeah, let me have it, I've got a shot. And the world's becoming incredibly complicated. The products we have to produce are more and more difficult. So that I'm fine, I'm a dinosaur, I'm a wounded gladiator fighting with narcissists and sociopaths in silos and factories.
The life of a lawyer, right?
But we have to embrace this idea of diversity, of ecosystem. That doesn't always have control. It's scary, it's messy, it's inefficient, it's sloppy, it's rich, it has incredible potential. I mean, we don't face, the problem with us is not inefficiency, it's simply being irrelevant. And if we're not going to be irrelevant, we have to embrace all of this.
Thank you. So what I'm really hearing from that is it's not black or white. There is a role for the ego. And when we start to actually understand that ego is based on self-worth, I want every single one of you to be balancing that within the organisation. But for you as an individual, a healthy self-worth is something you should be working on every day. So as somebody who's quite competitive, for those that know me, slight overachiever, Pavel, slight. Pavel, I'd love to know from you, how are we going to balance the sometimes over-the-top egos of our employees, but also at the same time ensure that ecosystem is self-sustainable? How do we make the two come together?
Yes, that's a very good question. And it's a very important question because, as Andrew said, it's very good examples. We need this diversity, which is more focused on ecosystem. But we also need people who are really goal-focused, who are really driven, they are really competitive, and they have kind of bigger ego. And we need to find a way how to accommodate all of these in the team, because a team is not about go along together. It's about found and balance our strengths and weaknesses as well. So very first step, what I say is that our culture can't be hidden. It needs to be there, it needs to be visible. We need to make sure that people understand where the company is going and what we are doing and why. So they can evolve together with the company. But also conversation, as we talk today, is very important. Because I see a good team like kind of jigsaw puzzle. You know, these are the pieces, and they have these parts which are sticking out. That's our strengths, which we can use. But each of us, we have these little holes which are empty. We might not know about them, but they are there. And that's part of the team to help us to fill up these gaps. So if you are able to facilitate the conversation and balance the eco and ego, you can create a nice picture from those jigsaw puzzles, right?
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but the jigsaw puzzles in my house always missing a piece, and I'm blaming that on the children. But certainly within the workforce, we have to be careful we don't lose those pieces.
Yeah.
I do want to come back to the idea of diversity for a second, though. Okay, because we all hear it's all diversity. We need to make sure diversity is within our organisational culture. That's great. But Andrew, is diversity always the way?
Well, no, clearly not. Diversity is seriously messy. It's like putting a handbrake on the organisation and say, how can we really stop the speed and velocity of the organisation? But I guess there's really two answers to it. One's the purest answer that says if we want to embrace an ecosystem, what we need to do is create diversity, foster a vision so that everybody's moving in the same direction, grow relationships so that there's multiple connections between everybody, and then just let the ecosystem exist and evolve and provide. But there's also the realist answer that we're not going to throw away all of the things we've learned for the last 200 years. So
Of course.
Really project management is becoming incredibly important, and that's where many of the people in this room are involved, by really chunking down the tasks at the beginning and saying, well, what's old world and what's new world? You know,
Yeah.
what bits do we need to bring in the think tanks and the communication? Where do we need to bring in the juniors and the people straight out of university? Where do we need to bring in the people from different cultural backgrounds to bring the breadth of ideas that we need to give the answers? But then how do we also crank in the expertise we've got to do it quickly, effectively, with high quality turnout? Because we need to manage and control, but we also need to draw on threads that I don't have in my little silo. I have to draw on the incredible.
It's like a $1 million question, isn't it? How do we get that balance? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually now going to turn it to you. And I know there's a roving mic out there somewhere. Can't quite see it right now, but I am assuring you there's a roving mic out there somewhere. I'd like to know from you, you've heard a little bit about what the ecosystem is, and of course what the ego system is. But what would you consider right now to be the biggest barriers to actually pushing forward with an ecosystem in the organisation? Hands up to anyone that would like to ask my wonderful guest or myself, what is it that you are struggling with the most in moving towards that ecosystem? If you were listening to Warren's session before, it's about having those courageous conversations and be ready and willing to tackle any of those moments where the ego does get out of balance within the organisation, but equally so, knowing that the ego is not the devil in the room here. The ego is the thing that we need to meet that productivity, right? And so
KPIs and the measurement is just critically important. And I look at my organisation, which is a large law firm, and despite the fact that we say collaboration and teamwork is something we value highly, all the KPIs are based around personal performance and delivery and billable hours. And they really don't support the collaboration and teamwork. And it's almost like something we have to bolt on as a matter of culture. The best thing I've ever seen, I was standing in the line at McDonald's at Cooma, going down the snow, and there were these two 14-year-old girls, and it's 14, and as any of you have had teenage daughters, they're toxic. And they're horrible to each other. But anyway, this one girl turned to the other and said, "You go, girl, display your awesomeness." And I thought, oh my God, that is so good. So I came back to my team and said, guys, I saw these girls and they said, "You go, girl, display your awesomeness." Go around to each other and say, "Display your awesomeness." So we've got this joke in my team where we go around high-five and display your awesomeness. But it's often not the KPI metrics that drive the change, it's little stories. It's those interactions, it's the knowing enough about the people you work with to influence their lives and earn that right to make the difference. So it's both. It's definitely we need broader KPIs and smarter KPIs, and you who are in HR in the room know better than I do. But we also need the relationships and just getting behind each other and building us up and not being caught in that toxic politics that is so much of professional services, so much of business.
thank you so much for all of your questions. I really appreciate it. And gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.